Russia and China are working to increase the output of major Russian LNG projects, including the Arctic LNG 2 and Sakhalin 2 projects. Reports from Russia have stated that the two nations are making, quote, serious joint progress to boost LNG trade, with China set to benefit from cheap Russian LNG as they consolidate the bilateral trade relationship between their countries. The Arctic LNG 2 project in particular has been hit by Western sanctions, with the aim being to prevent Russia from building more production capacity for energy producer products. However, independent reports suggest that total imports to China from the Arctic LNG 2 project have already surpassed 370 kilotons of LNG since late August. And China is set to receive at least 150 kilotons more in the near future. This marks Beijing's swift transition from not importing any Arctic LNG to becoming its main outlet. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for staying with us. Now, given this impact of Western sanctions on Russian energy and their intention to prevent Russian projects and also looking at the Ukraine and Russia's war, how has China navigated these to position itself as the primary recipient? And how is China benefiting from this situation?
They have waited. They have been hardball in these negotiations. There's also been another discussion about building an oil pipeline from Russia all the way down to China, and then the Chinese turning around and saying, "We do this, we put this in place, then we want a very good deal on the amount of oil, on the price that we are paying for that oil. In fact, we want the same kind of deal domestically, where you are trying to keep the domestic price down of oil for Russian citizens." So, and of course that price would be as low as possible, where in the end Russia are turning around and going, well, does this make it economically viable for us? In this particular region on the West Siberian coast, there is the plant that has been built there is to then generate 20 million tons of LNG. We all know, having you and I reported on the SCO on the Shanghai conference, and we look at who was there, we look at the way Russia and their relationship with China, and as you referenced to in regard to the Ukraine-Russian war, and Russia war chest is dependent on selling energy. And as China would then, on one sense publicly, but also really trying to look for very, very good trade deals that benefit them. So you can have an interesting discussion about saying that, are they friends, are they united? The whole thing is to then, for China's point of view, is to undercut the power of the West, and this is what this is all about. But potentially supporting an ally, but also getting cheap energy that they need for their own economy, but also to make a point to the Western world that they're, in my opinion, continuing to flex their muscles and wanting to be the number one economic powerhouse in the world. Asuma.
Right. And how do you view the growing energy partnership between these two countries, particularly with regard to, and what implications might this have for global energy markets now?
Well, we've already, I mean, you and I have commented on the fact that, where India has been buying oil off Russia and then selling it on the wide open market and making a profit of that. And then there's been the criticism from President Trump over saying, well, if you're doing this, then you're funding the Russian economy, which is then helping them to, in regard to their war that they started on the 22nd of February 2022 by invading Ukraine. Plus, President Trump has also had a go at other European partners who are saying, well, where are you buying your energy from? Come to America instead of looking to Russia. Because it is, at the one hand, we've got, as I said, we've got this war going on, but how then this is being financed? So we've got this economic war of of the material of oil, gas, and other energy that is actually going on, because we want the war in Europe to stop, and then it's looking at how that is then funded. That's why President Trump has said what he has said, and also in the past, in his first administration, when he said, "Well, you're just being dependent on Russia for your energy, and you need to wake up to that." We all remember when Angela Merkel and co. He was on a seat and they were gathering around his desk and they were looking down on him as if they're giving him a lecture, and they didn't like the fact that what he said in regard to where do you get your energy from, Asuma.
And lastly, what are the long-term consequences of this, in your words, economic war, particularly for China, if China continues to deepen its reliance on Russian LNG? Is there any risk for China by doing this or buying Russian oil, LNG?
Well, again, you make a very, very good point about what is happening then long term, because we can argue that the Chinese economy may not be as strong as they would then like to project. They are reliant on, they need energy to keep pushing the economic powerhouse that they want to have. And as you and I know, as we look back in history, sadly, wars, disputes are fought over mineral resources, over oil, over gas. If we go through the last 300 years, we would have an interesting discussion about that and the power plays and what has happened between countries, where now we are trying to, in all sincerity, even though we look at certain aspects of the world at the moment, it seems far more of a dangerous place. But we look at the fact that we're trying to negotiate where if people then depend economically with trading with each other, then they're not necessarily going to go to war, which is the mindset of President Trump, where he's wanting to sort these issues out, tie up the whole thing of globalism, so that people then wouldn't do that. But it also means that if someone made it to the top, you can then have global control over everything that's going on. I think Asuma, at the moment, I hate to say it, on the one hand, there's like a sitting back to see what's going to play out, even though potentially we've already just talked about it. We can see how this is playing out. And for the UK, for argument's sake, if we'd actually gone up to the North Sea and started drilling our own oil, then we wouldn't be dependent on Russian gas. We wouldn't be dependent on anyone else. And then our own energy prices, which seems to be the most expensive in Europe and beyond, would then fall through the floor and be extremely cheap. As we look at the world, there's a lot of power play going on in regard to energy, and you're quite right to ask that question. And I think over the next few months, we are going to see that unfold. The frustration is people want a war to end, to where Russia invaded Ukraine. They want that to end. And energy and where we go and get that is all part of that discussion to end it, and asking countries not to export their natural gas or their oil to actually fund that. It's all part of that. And plus, as I said before, without sounding repetitive, the Chinese then pushing for economic dominance. Asuma.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mark for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well.